This is part 3 of a retrospective of the THQ published WWE console games. Of course, check out the other parts and the announcement for more context and history. One detail I forgot to mention in the previous part, and will give me something to discuss in this one, is the other main name of the majority of these games, Yuke's. With THQ publishing these games, Yuke's Co. was the main developers for over a decade, even published a few of them in Japan. This continued to the end of the 2010s with Take-Two purchasing the licensing rights after THQ's fall, and 2K Sports publishing any future games until Yuke's were dropped after 2K19. And with 2K20 and even 22 from some sources, yeah, I bet they regret it heavily. Funny enough, like Aki corporations before them, they develop and, for some, publish mainly other wrestling games along with other ventures. And speaking of Aki, the company actually recommended Yuke's to THQ. Real class act there. Don't feel too bad for Aki since they proved their legendary status afterwards with games like Def Jam Fight for New York. And like Yuke's and 2K, the follow-up EA release that wasn't developed by them was pretty lacking at best. There's also Jakks Pacific, whom owned the toy line license during the majority of THQ's run of WWE games. Interesting enough, both THQ and Jakks, along with LJN, were founded by one man, Jack Friedman. One hell of a businessman. He made LJN in 1970, left in 87, founded THQ in 1990, left in 94, co-founded Jakks Pacific just a year later, and retired in March 2010, a month and some days prior to his death in May. And with LJN and THQ, he left before they were mainly video game developers. Hey, the man really wanted to sell toys. So now that that's out of the way, how'd the WWE fare with its first leap to the GameCube? Well, let's pop in 2002's Wrestlemania 18 or X8 and see.
Well, crap. Well, I guess I had to go to Amazon for a good cop. Motherfucker!
Alright, let's try this again. WWE Wrestlemania 18 or X8, or rather WWF Wrestlemania X, whatever. Given only that the box art has WWE and the game, along with the official merchandise sticker, all have WWF. Thought I wasn't gonna encounter this until Raw in the next part. Oh well. The game shows some promise with the intro comprised of footage from the actual event, and then it drops down. The gameplay is pretty much the same as just bringing with barely any changes outside of perhaps a difference of weak and strong attacks and weak and strong grapples being easier. It also incorporated the finishers bar along with a sort of status bar that can represent the wrestler's health. The creative superstar mode feels like it's the beta of Just Bring It, having some lesser options for clothing and continuing the tradition of horrid CAS faces. When the Mankind mask feels like the best option, you failed. The game has a unique feature called Battle for the Belts, where you have multiple fights to gain a fictional or the current belts, along with classic versions like the Smoking Skull belt. Which difficulty you set can determine which belt you can fight for. You can't even get a low difficulty belt if you're on a higher difficulty. You could even create your own in battle to defend it or to gain one from a friend. What a fun feature! Now how's the career mode here titled Path of a Champion? Well, it's pretty much the same, but only with the current belts. Wow. The only difference here is that if you lose, you can try again where you lost, while Battle for the Belts, you have to restart the whole thing. You can gain plenty of unlockables when you win certain objectives, like win the Intercontinental Belt to unlock Vince McMahon, the classic SmackDown Arena by winning the Heavyweight Belt with The Rock, and just winning the same belt to unlock Chris Wrestler Unknown. But presented like this gives no real incentive to do any of them, and figuring this out while recording had me lose interest, and when I lost, I just stopped there. You know what, I'll use this as a way to make a point clear just in case a thought pops up as I compare all these games. I might end up being more harsh on this and any possible future titles without a more structured and or presented career mode, while I was way more accepting of games like Wrestlemania 2000 or the acclaimed games in Part 1. This is because of the fact that as the years go by, there becomes less and less of an excuse for such a decision. Hell, I might give some retroactive negativity towards Wrestlemania 2000 since Aki already had at least 2 wrestling titles prior, and it was still a bit lacking, but then No Mercy came out and was such a major step. It just feels off having games providing such a lesser career mode afterwards. I could barely give some leeway on this one due to being on a new console, since SmackDown 1 still had plenty of effort, and it was their first real dive into that console and that engine. I would say the same for Just Bring It, but it's not all that much of a jump from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2 compared to the N64 to the GameCube. The real reason I put so much importance to season mode and career mode is that it's a real show of effort on giving the player a similar experience to participating in such larger-than-life events from the programs. It also gives more substance to the replayability for a game. Stuff like Path to the Champion and Battle for the Belts aren't bad. In fact, the latter pops up way down the road. But when it's the main focus and it's this simple at this point, there's no difference to it than just plain random exhibition matches and then fighting whoever has the belt. Hell, if you're doing this, might as well go down the Warzone route and make some entertaining cutscenes of the wrestlers.
The Heartbreak Kid is man enough to admit when he gets beat. Don't get too cocky, big man, because it just might come back to bite you in the, Oh, I forgot. This is a family game.
Listen up, punk! That little ass body of yours kept talking to you with the ass whipping I'm gonna give you in the ring. If you want to step up to play team, bring it on. Cause I forgot to take my medication in the morning and I'm in a real bad mood.
I mean, I was clearly shocked at this game's price on Amazon, and I'm even more shocked at it after playing it. I don't expect every game to heavily drop down in price, especially Nintendo games, but this for that kind of price? Hell no. September 8th of 2003 brought us Wrestlemania 19. Again, it has an intro with footage from that WrestleMania, but this time with some speeches from the wrestlers. This game plays as a step up from 18, with it being more influenced by the Aki developed games from the previous consoles. The only difference is that light grabs don't lock you in a grapple, it just does the move, kinda like the early SmackDown games. It really does feel like a mixture of everything we had previously gameplay-wise, with the biggest example being having both a momentum/status bar and a finisher bar instead of one or the other. This is a combination that I definitely don't mind because, admittedly, it'll be more of a back and forth rather than one side dominating for high momentum and then landing a finisher securing the win. Here it's possible to start a comeback with a stored finisher when you're losing. Plus, it can be nice to combine the two styles. Your moves can be interrupted like in the Aki games, and the fact that you'll constantly be fighting groups in the story mode might mean it can happen a lot. When they're not taunting. I'll get to the story mode in a while, but next, Create a Superstar. The Create a Superstar mode is a bit of an upgrade to 18, mainly in the better layer implementation, and that you can see your options without having to choose them first. I'm not sure if this is the first game where being a heel or babyface was a changing option for create superstars and established ones, but here, kinda off because, well, once again, we'll get into it. Plus, I feel like this is still the era where heel and face was a blurred line, but whatever. And with the improved layers, there's an option to create your own logo to slap on your wrestler. I swear this wasn't supposed to be the Team Rocket R, but fuck it. The biggest improvement here is actually the entrance setup. You can have the standard copy of Superstar or one of their original entrance templates, but it can be expanded to where you can control aspects of the entrance from lighting, pyro, camera positions, changing the animations, etc, etc. The UI and interface can get a little wonky, and without changing what you're currently working on or viewing the result outside of the full entrance, there's no good way to view a certain point in the entrance. Doesn't seem that big, but trying to get it right at the end can be annoying without having to mess something up or viewing the whole thing. But it's such freedom and creativity I love in these games. In addition, there's a training mode, yeah, never touching that, as well as shop zone to purchase weapons, attire, moves, and entrances for customization, as well as the tribute points. And now, finally, the story mode, titled Revenge Mode. Whether as an established wrestler or a creative one, you find yourself being tossed out by security on Vince McMahon's orders. Why? Never told. But remember, this is Vince McMahon. You could have gone off script once and get this treatment sooner or later. Stephanie McMahon brings you to her office, offering a deal to ruin the preparations for WrestleMania. You do this by destroying promotional material and apparent fan festivals at a mall, messing up the construction of the area, sinking the shipping bars, among other tasks. Oh, and murdering crew members, officers, workers, and possibly fellow wrestlers. Yeah, see why the whole heel/face choice seems meaningless? I'd say you doing this at the docks is fine since there's a chance of survival, not so much at the most active parking structure ever, or the construction site with a bottomless pit where, at one point, you battle another wrestler on who can take out the most workers. Well, that is, unless you toss them off. Oh, never mind. Not as bottomless as you think. So most of the missions are smash this, take out this many workers or specific bosses this game has. There are also protect X missions and go get Y tasks. I mean, this stuff gets harder as it goes, with some seemingly revenge mode exclusive features like climbing poles and using the run button to launch yourself over. All this to train you for this ninja warrior like course you have to go through, and after getting run over so many times, you get to kill a random bodyguard. After 2 missions having you cross the busy lanes to go to the middle and climb a pole to collect your pay. Gee, thanks Stephanie, glad I made this deal. Only to turn back to the same area you started the last mission to wreck a semi-truck. Or them keeping Stephanie captive in the mall and later wreck a car Vince was gonna use. He's used to doing that, but why both in this random mall? All this craziness, property damage, and murder leads to Stephanie launching her own WrestleMania with you fighting Vince as the final revenge and the way you earn your pay. After already getting it in the parking structure. Oh, whatever, she doesn't want to pay you and you spear her for all that. One wild ride. Like SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, WrestleMania 19 is a sign of major improvements from the previous game, showing that second time is the charm. It's hard to say which is worse or better out of these first and second installments due to many different content in each game, and if I remember correctly, the Xbox is on the same boat as well, so this little thought will continue when I get to Raw 2. But for now, 19 is a solid title and the uniqueness of Revenge Mode helps it stand out from the rest. I only partly regret restarting it from the beginning, holy crap. But in all seriousness, good stuff. WWE Day of Reckoning. Oh god! There's no tie-in to a show or pay-per-view with this title. What is Oh, whatever, it's a cool title. And a rarity with any wrestling game for the WWE. Released in 2004, this starts with generic shots of gameplay with a narrator going on about how tough it is to get to the top, tied it in with the game's name, along with the tagline of keeping friends close and your enemies closer.
But for those who stand in your way and betray you, their day of reckoning will come. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
We'll see if it lives up to that. God, this brings me back. The title coming up as Anthrax and Public Enemy's Bring the Noise plays. And hold up, there's another song in the intro, Bonecracker by Shokor. Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have whatever this game since this is such a change. It's not like before when we had songs like Rollin', since it was Taker's theme at the time, with the major payment being Fred Durst in the games featuring Rollin'. Yeah, I forgot to mention that for Just Bring It, but getting back on track. There's more songs playing on the menus, during matches, cutscenes, even used for entrance themes. This was the first WWE game to use licensed music as the soundtrack. Hell, this particular selection of songs isn't unique to just this game, since I bet they really wanted to make sure the investment was worth it, both to possibly do it again and to save money by having it in 2 other games within a year with a handful of additions. And I love it, it got me into one of my favorite bands along with some earworms I still listen to this day. Even listening to them in game brought me back more, even if the edits are now more distracting after listening to the originals for so long. And it's not just censoring bad words or actions, but bottom lines ending too. We had to choose songs like this and Superstars just to edit them out heavily. But hey, it's not the biggest one I could think of. Moving on, of course we have the skippable tutorial and Chop Zone returning to... Wait, no money? Oh. Shit. And with that, Create a Superstar. It doesn't feel that much of an update, but that's not a bad thing since Create a Superstar has been pretty good. There might have been the added feature of seeing parts you could purchase at the store while creating your wrestler, but I say that's a plus so you can prioritize what you want to buy. Also the feature to make a custom headshot instead of just a blank character representing it. The entrance feature is about the same as 19, perhaps better at displaying the option you're looking at, but again, you can't view a section of your entrance without the full preview. This is very annoying when wanting to get the best camera angle for a shot, but it's still improving, getting the love that any pyro can be automatically linked with an animation. The gameplay is barely different from the last game, really showing its influence with the momentum bar being basically the same as the attitude meter from the N64 games. Overall, no real major changes outside of the momentum shift, where if you are in a danger zone, you can turn the tide of a super mode. The story mode this time is back to you fighting matches in the WWE. This time it follows your created wrestler throughout the performance center, recapping some features you didn't went to the tutorial for, building yourself up by fighting performers that all use Polyamorous as their entrance theme for some reason. Also weird to have the boxing one for the do X grapple counters. After those and a match with an injured Matt Hardy, you get transferred to Sunday Night Heat. Some more fights and you're able to go to either SmackDown or Raw, where you either join Evolution or the in-game faction of Taker's new ministry. So I chose SmackDown, for reasons. Funny enough, this faction is pretty questionable. It's pretty much like they retooled the Evolution story. Taker, Deadman Taker mind you, pretty much acted like Triple H, or even Biker Taker with some talk about the mythic powers and darkness and all that. Just a little off as an Undertaker fan and seeing Deadman Taker be devious and caring so much about the world title. But who else is in? Well, Big Show, Charlie Haas, and the most fitting member, Booker T. What the hell? Granted, it's pretty slim pickings for top talent with the top 3 already being in the faction, and I doubt a hardcore faction with RVD, Rhino, Hardcore Holly, and a random other would be ideal at the time. You know, before they tried to milk the ECW bucks out of people. Just 1 year away. Also, anyone who could remotely be part of this faction and it'll make sense are on Raw. Them being Kane, Edge, and Christian. Members of the Brood and the revamped Monster Kane makes complete sense for a new ministry. That's the main reason why the brand split sucked. It interfered with the fictional faction in one game. But yeah, I'll say that in general the story is okay, a fine rise through WWE from development to the top of the mountain. I'll say that replayability of the story mode is shot due to the lack of some choices outside of either Raw or SmackDown, and as I pointed out, the fact that both stories are practically the same. Not to mention, this is the follow-up to the unique revenge mode of WrestleMania 19. But I'll say it's pretty cool that they have a development section, even if I bet it's more romanticized here. If I have to sum this up, I'll pin it as a good back to basics. I admit that I'm questioning how I feel about this game after WrestleMania 19. It gave minor updates besides anything based on the roster and focused more on the story mode, and that's where I have the most trouble. Is it better to have a basic story of rising in the WWE or an out there, more creative story outside of the ring? A bit of a cop-out answer, but I welcome either one, as long as the good quality is there. No doubt the in-ring story will be the norm. It is a sort of simulation at its core, but I say changing it up will always keep it fresh. And as the first real original story where others were mainly just recreations of events from the actual WWE, it's a great start. Another good one for the GameCube. Finally, we have WWE Day of Reckoning 2. Alright, I like this game already. Released 1 year later, the sequel to Day of Reckoning boasts about a focus on a story mode with an actual story that follows after the first game. I remember being hyped for this one more than normal. This is also the final console exclusive WWE game before SmackDown vs. Raw was the main game that then became multi-platform. Technically, SmackDown vs. Raw 06 was the last one, with it only being on the PlayStation 2, and then 07 being on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 2, but Day of Reckoning 2 certainly feels like the true end of this console uniqueness since WrestleMania 2000. All ended in 2005. God damn. Well, it starts like the previous game with narration of the gameplay with the game's main theme of Burn It All by A Dark Halo. The only licensed song this time with the typical background tracks like the many games prior to these, though this time it features cutscenes from the story mode and narration that ties into it, being that the World Heavyweight Championship being stolen. Oh no, that leaves us with the superior undisputed later named WWE Championship and Triple H without the love of his life. Oh no. Anyway, the presentation of the menus isn't something I usually comment on, but I like this one more so than most. Some try to mimic the layout and feel of the show seen in SmackDown games and Raw, or the generic machine or attitude themes or whatever. Here it's an arena with crowds waiting outside, with you venturing into the production control room for settings, backstage for the story, and the concessions for the shop zone. Wait. Oh fuck. Not again. Shit. Oh hey look, a GameCube in the control room. Speaking of the options menu, one interesting option is the control of the sensitivity of the triggers for counters, either as a light touch or pressing down on it to a click. Surprised to see that it was not only also in the previous Day of Reckoning, but in WrestleMania 19 as well. I knew the GameCube controller had pressure sensitive triggers, I just haven't known of any game using them outside of Super Mario Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion. Just giving props. The gameplay is, oh shit, the camera! It's at the side of the ring! I'm scared, turn it back! Oh sweet Jesus, I'm not ready for the future. Fuck it, I'll be brave. Yep, you can change the camera with the default being at the side, and even dramatic camera view. And like I alluded to, this will be the camera they'll mainly use in future titles. The view of the Titantron and ramp will be missed. So the gameplay is pretty much the same as before with the addition of a stamina meter, another staple we'll see in future games. This title is a real trailblazer. The stamina puts an end to the playstyle of full-on aggression, but it can possibly slow a match down. Though if you get hit too much, your stamina can still be dropped. Speaking of trailblazing, you can say this is where it went from arcade to simulation, or wanting to be as realistic as possible, for better or for worse. I will say that the wrestler's speed is impacted better, with certain moves, running, and actions like climbing the turnbuckle being heavily affected. I just had that feeling more in this one compared to the original. The other attributes are well effective, and you can see the change throughout playtime in 1, but speed outside of running doesn't feel as impacted with my created wrestler. There's also an addition to submission moves where during setup the participants can choose one of 4 modes the user wants to use the move for. Simple tapping out, aka submission, draining stamina to taunt and gain momentum, or as a rest. The victim picks something different and the hold is locked with the struggle meter and more damage with the risk of tapping out. Pick the same as the user and while you gain damage from the move, you break out of it. Best bet to get out without any damage is the counter, but this is a great tool to make submission moves more engaging for both parties than just button mashing to not tap out. The creative superstar mode barely changed, if at all. Good, don't fix what wasn't broken. The loading feels longer compared to Day of Reckoning 1, but it could be my disc though. The biggest thing I have with this whole game, definitely due to the story mode being a follow-up to the first game, is that you can't import your previous created wrestlers. Of course there will be issues via moves, clothing, and entrances possibly locked away from you at the moment, or even removed, as well as importing a highly built wrestler. But at least have the game make a similar build to them. Again, not a big difference between the two that's highly noticeable. They added a section and attributes specifically for your effect on moves which, with higher levels, can give your wrestler access to higher power or signature moves, mainly as finishers. Pretty much bringing back the system from the early SmackDown games. It can be a bit annoying at first since the XP gained, again, is tied to story mode and how you do, which can be pretty slow now that you're worried about 5 more traits to upgrade if you're targeting for a well-balanced wrestler. Money, funny enough, can be earned via exhibition matches, even when you have the computer fight itself. And now the main focus of this game, the story. This takes place 1 year after the first game and have it follow as if your character chose Raw. You lost the title after a rematch with Triple H and haven't done anything career-wise ever since. So like a good chunk of non-main event people who win the championship and drift away from the championship scene after losing. Very immersive, guys. During this time you develop a relationship with Stacy Keibler. Okay, that's a good trade. So a controversial decision after a title match with Triple H and Chris Jericho left the World Heavyweight title as vacant, leading to a tournament that brings our guy back to the World Heavyweight title scene. This leads to a WrestleMania rematch with you and Triple H, but the World Heavyweight Championship has been stolen. There is some finger pointing mainly towards your character and Edge being one of the main guys doing so, all because he wants Stacy. A cage match with Triple H leads to one addition, player choice on whether to take one path or another. Like the first one being either going after the Intercontinental Championship or going after Edge. Obvious choice. It can shape up your character like whether you're focused on the championships and yourself or those around you. Examples being the first one with the Intercontinental Championship or Edge, or later on when you head to SmackDown and are in for the run for the US belt, you can choose whether to aid Rob Van Dam when he gets jumped from the Big Show's boys. But as far as I can tell, it doesn't do much in the long haul. Whether you go after Edge or the Intercontinental Championship, it'll still lead to the chapter with Kane and HBK jumping in, and a cage match for the belt with Christian still holding it. Or when you lose the tag team belts with RVD, you can choose to either try to regain them or just go for the US belt, and both choices lead to the road for the United States Championship since RVD rejects the help and wants to go for singles gold and recommends you do the same. The ending for these choices are mainly the same, but the path is changed if that makes any sense. But going back to the story, you gain the Intercontinental Championship, and before defense, you're framed and fired. Now you jump to SmackDown to try to make it big and bring Stacy with you. The story has some twists and turns while being pretty simple. There isn't much of a question to who stole it, but here's a spoiler just in case you want to experience it yourself. Hey, you never know. Time code right here to skip. Alright, it was Edge with Randy Orton and Chris Jericho. By the time your character was calling them out, being right before WrestleMania, they attack without any further attempts to be hidden, even though they try to hide it the next time you meet them. where they admit to doing it to you. Not completely smart, are they? It's funny to think of how high up Edge becomes not too long after this game's release, and here he is a bit of a pushover. Might be because of the attack earlier, but being the first of 2 matches on WrestleMania, you can beat him no problem. Speaking of, there's a weird fluctuation of difficulty at times. You can go through hell near the end, especially with the bullshit Kurt Angle submission match where your submissions barely last a few seconds, if even that, but he can hold any for a minute or so, breaking you to red if you don't tap right then and there, with fine stats and good button mashing. Even then, Edge is easy in the last man, or rather brand, standing match with Triple H, the final boss for some of the games around this time, is a fine challenge. Weird to say, but this is after the submission match, 2 matches against the near invincible John Cena, being Hardcore and Cage, and
You will go one-on-one with The Undertaker!
in a Hell in a Cell. All this difficulty for the last 2 matches to be easier, so good challenge is a matter of perspective, I guess. Early on you have a fatal 4-way match in the steel cage for the Intercontinental Championship, and I'm reminded of actually having to restart the story back in the day, just to level up enough to fend off the 3. Stuff like that in the Kurt Angle match can soft lock you if you're not careful with your stats. Speaking of the steel cage, it feels like someone really loves this match type since it's been used for not only the first singles match against Triple H, but for pretty much every singles titles match where you win, being the Intercontinental, the United States, and even the WWE Championship. And while I really like Stacey Keibler, I may have been really subtle about it, the character's love for her seems overly desperate at times, especially after going to SmackDown. Even the credits, while mostly being backgrounds, have close-up shots of the Stacey model, with the only other wrestler in the credits being Triple H. Once. Far away while he's doing his entrance. I'm guessing Stacey against a steel cage is a fantasy in the story team's minds. All that and maybe more doesn't change the fact that this is one of the best story modes, at least so far. A mild framing and regaining story with one of the best endings. Yes, because of both the belt and the diva. Kinda wonder what a third Day of Reckoning would bring after this. And that's really how I feel about this, a great step forward with the eagerness and the potential of what a third can do. Not just in story mode if it continues the storyline, but in gameplay too with the evidence of the stamina meter and submission additions. This, along with another game we'll get to, marks the end of standalone wrestling games before one title becomes multi-platform and the handful of spin-offs that, again, we'll get to. I'll talk more about these console exclusive titles next time as a whole, but overall, this was a great way to end the GameCube series. Two down, one to go with this era of WWE games. How will Microsoft, the new competitor to the consoles, compete? Well, next time, we'll tackle Xbox with Raw and the final specific pay-per-view themed game, WrestleMania 21.